Good morning, Hacksters! It's a Tuesday morning, and that means that, well, it's morning here, and that means that we have another Hackster Cafe for you, coming to you live. I think both of us are in San Francisco, is that right?
Yeah, I'm at the beach where the weather's reasonable.
Nice. Live from San Francisco, it's Hackster Cafe. And this week's guest is Kat Scott of Open Robotics. You're an awesome person. You're an advocate at Open Robotics. You're on the board at Oshawa, is that right?
Yes, I am.
So many cool things, and you have a really interesting history that we're going to dive into a little bit. But first up, there's some really exciting news out of Open Robotics that you're going to share about. Is that right?
Oh, well, yeah, we can talk about it a little bit. We have a new robot out, the TurtleBot 4. There's two variants. There's the light and there's standard. I have both of them here. I'm gonna grab the light because it's sitting on this guy. So this is TurtleBot 4, which is the light version.
Is that the one I met at Noisebridge?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I actually got the other one. I got another stream going here. I got the other one last week. I just kind of got it going this weekend.
Nice.
But yeah, so there's this one, and then there is the other one that's over there. Short of it, I got some sizes of this a little bit easier, so I'm not lifting it up. But generally, there's RP LiDAR up here, a Lexonis depth camera. It's called an OPD. And then back here in the whole thing is a Crete 3 from iRobot. So it's basically a Roomba without the vacuum. And then there is a Raspberry Pi in here on the light. The standard is a little bit more souped up. So it's got the OPD Pro. It's got a whole breakout board with a little LCD screen that tells you a bunch of stuff. It's pretty cool. I actually got other older TurtleBots over here. I got the OG TurtleBot. I just got this rack of robots, realistically.
Sweet. Your shirt is amazing, by the way. That is so cool. Yeah, so you had some exciting news to share. I think you were going to share some slides or something.
Yeah, let me do that. Yeah, I got some.
Oh,
share screen.
Yeah. While she's loading that up, everyone, you can find Kat's Twitter down in the description below, along with links to all the stuff that we're going to be talking about today, all kinds of interesting stuff. So just scroll down and click those links if you'd like to know more. But yeah, let's have a look.
I mean, I just put together a whole lot of stuff that we could, like, just visual references, really.
Great.
So I guess I can do the background on, not me, but not, Open Robotics, right? So let's see, I want to say 2005, 2006, there was this company called Willow Garage, which was kind of like an incubator for cool open source robotics ideas. So at the time, like, open source for web tech was going crazy, but robotics was still kind of like not really moving along technology wise. And so a bunch of people came together, got some funding, built this place called Willow Garage. Basically, it's the genesis. It's not the genesis of OpenCV, but it's pretty close to it. They're the ones who did a lot of the really big early work in OpenCV. ROS came out of it, and another library called PCL. Also, two robots, the PR2, which is the giant arm robot that's on the right.
I love the PR2.
Yeah, they're pretty cool little robots. And then the TurtleBot 1. So what happened is, I think approximately, I want to say 2007 or 8. Oh wait, no, it must have been 2012 or 2011. Willow Garage kind of went under, and we started Open Robotics, which is the sort of nonprofit organization that, you know, stewards ROS. We do the core ROS development, and we have a couple other projects as well. And we're not that big. We're like 50 people on like 3-4 continents. You know, probably about half-ish, maybe a third are in Silicon Valley, and then we have a really big office in Singapore, and then people spread all over the globe. And it started with ROS and Gazebo, Gazebo is basically our simulator. So think video game with a physics engine inside of it. So so much higher fidelity physics simulation than you'd find in, say, your normal video game. And what we do there is it's all tailored to work for robotics applications. And this may seem like, well, why would I want to do a robot in a video game? Well, the answer is that robots are expensive. They're a pain to work with. You're like, I was working on this thing, you're crawling on the floor all day and something wiggles loose and you're like, why doesn't the thing work? It's just a pain. And so if you make a simulated robot, you can test your code a lot easier. You can do, like, if you're testing a behavior, you can do 100 simulations at once in the cloud and come up with the solution a lot faster than you would in your house, or just working on the floor. And then we have one other project that is fairly new and not well known, but it's starting to become well known, which is called Open RMF, which Open RMF is essentially a way. What we found is that, hey, people were building robots. They weren't just building one robot, they were building like 10 robots or 100 robots. Like, one of these situations where you'd see autonomous mobile robots in a manufacturing facility or fulfillment facility. And then they come and get another 100 robots of a different kind. Let's say you have your like move things around robot and then your put it on the shelf robot. And how the problem ended up being, how do you get all these robots to work with each other? And then how do you get them to work with, like, say, your doors or your elevators or some other infrastructure in your building? So we have this new project called Open RMF. So if you're not familiar with ROS, it's the really, really like 2-second version is ROS is a set of, it's a build tool which allows you to use primarily C++ and Python, but just about any language you like to do, like robot plumbing, like how do you move the data through your robot, tools. So, how do you put together your logs? How do you, do stuff like that? And then there's sort of capabilities that come baked into ROS. So like navigation, which we might do a quick demo here, and the
Yes.
ecosystem.
And it's set up sort of as topics, right? Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's topic based, right? So if you've worked with, why can't I think of the name? I mean, it's just a general pub sub, right? In a certain way, like if you've seen like Redis, maybe it's not exactly, but it's kind of like that, where you just have a topic and you subscribe to it and you look at it, and everything else is sort of built on top of that. Yeah, so simulation wise, we just released Ignition Fortress, which is our newest simulator. There's a new one coming up in a couple months here, but this is the newest version right now. There's tons of cool stuff in it. We've added cool features. The big one I think is really interesting. We've been doing a lot of maritime robotics research. So that's been one.
Cool. Buoyancy
And then,
engine.
yeah, and then there's a segmentation camera. So this is really cool. So you can generate, since you know everything in your simulation, you can label everything, like, so when you're doing computer vision work, right, that you need this labeled data, or otherwise, and it's expensive, it's hard to get. So you can take a simulation and you could basically put a label on top of everything in that scene, and you get tons and tons of free data, which is pretty amazing.
Also, it mentioned a joint force torque sensors, which it sounds like it's for compliant robotics. Is that doing with like human in the loop kind of?
Yep.
Cool. So
Let's
the
see.
PR2 I often bring up as an example of a robot that was really designed to like work with people, and how it basically is incapable of hurting someone unless something goes completely sideways. Like it's got all these sort of checks and balances built in, right? And it's cool to see that coming to like fleet-based robotics, especially because in factories and such, like where you got
Robots have been in cages for decades, right? And this capability to have compliant robots makes it possible to have people and robots work in one spot.
Cool.
Yeah, the other project, just to touch on it, and I'm just going to touch on it briefly, is this Open RMF thing. It's now deployed in 2 hospitals that we know of. We just randomly got a paper came out and it's like, hey, we're using your open source in this completely other hospital in Estonia. We do some work with the Singaporean government in their hospitals, but this is just a little quick demo of just like 2 or 3 different robots running around in here, moving through the hospital on planned paths, interacting with each other, interacting with people in a safe environment. Pretty cool stuff.
It reminds me a little bit of the NeedyBot, but so this was a social robot that was designed to go in like corporate centers and stuff and introduce itself to people and introduce people to each other and be kind of a locus of social interaction. But that one, a big part of its deal was that it had to ask people to like push elevator buttons for it and stuff. And this one, it sounds like on your slide, it looked like it's integrated with the building's infrastructure so that it's able to like open elevators and stuff on its own. I think that's really cool.
Oh yeah, this is actually a simulation, right? This is another power of simulation, right? Is that we can just set up
Ooh.
this whole hospital and test everything before it
What?
actually gets there. But you can see, I think there's a little section here where it actually gets on the
Oh yeah,
elevator.
look at that. That's so cool.
Yeah, so that's Open RMF.
So you've
More
solved
hospital.
the Daleks and stairs problem. They just need to use the elevator.
Yes, yes. And they got to have like some sort
Terrifying.
of pokey. If it's not, an Internet of Things elevator, you got to have a pokey to go push the button.
Yeah, maybe that's what the attachments were for.
Yep, a big plunger comes out, hits
Plunger
the
kind
button.
of thing, and all. There you go, folks.
Yeah. So more on Ross. Just huge community. Like I think we have like, let's say 9,250 research articles about
Wow.
Ross now published. Let's see. Last year we had, close to 1 million visitors on Ross.org, or just a month. All of these different platforms we're running are going up pretty quickly. But last year, just in terms of raw downloads, and this isn't any of our mirrors or anything, we hit over 500 million Ross package downloads. So it's not a tiny project. Yeah, and so there's a new version called Ross 2 that we just released.
Yeah.
We actually just put out a really big science robotics paper on it, where we go through 5 real world applications of Ross being used. So it's land, sea, air, space, and manufacturing. We look at like one robotics application each using Ross.
Can you give us a preview? What's the space one?
Oh, I'll get there. I'll get there.
Okay, cool. I'm jumping the gun.
Yeah, and so tons of people are using it. It's not a little tiny community, and lots of government orgs, lots of research orgs as well. So the new thing that's going on right now, if you're not familiar with Ross, is that every year we put out a Ross distro, and then concurrently we now have Ross 1, which is the first version of Ross, and Ross 2, which we started working on, I want to say, in 2017, which is the sort of next generation of Ross. Ross had been around for 10 years at that point, and it's like, oh, well, we have to go, break a few eggs to really improve things. And so what's going on is that every year we release make a Ross release. Every other year, it's called an LTS, or long-term support. So a big release is a quick way to think about it. And then, throughout the years, the distros sort of go end of life, and we stop maintaining them. So this year we released Humble Hawksbill, which is the big Ross 2 LTS that we're really trying to encourage people to use. Fundamentally, at this point, right, we're running out of Ross 1 releases. That no new ones are coming out. They are going to be, retired at some point. We have Melodic, which is the second to last release, that's going to be going end of life in 2023, and then there's another Ross 1 version distro called Ross Noetic, which is going to go end of life in 2025. But all this to say, if you're going to use Ross 1, use Noetic. If you're going to use Ross 2, we suggest you use Humble, and I really suggest you, if you're starting out, just learn Ross 2. It's not worth your time at this point to learn Ross 1. Still, Ross 1 still exists. It's still probably about 2/3. These are kind of old numbers. 2/3 of the community, but it's rapidly moving over. We're kind of having this Python 2 to Python 3 moment, so it's a little bit confusing.
It's kind of both at the same time.
Yep. And so, anything you build on Humble is going to be supported till 2027. There's Docker containers. There's lots of docs and new features. There are a few new features. I'll talk about some like new projects that are coming out with it, but it's really a lot of bug fixes and documentation improvements. It really is kind of ready to roll.
I love the styling on this, by the way, and on the Humble Hawksbill, or on the Ross page, there is a description of where the name comes from that I think is pretty cool that we could get into later.
Yeah, we pick them all every year. We have an artist here in San Francisco, Josh Ellingson, who does.
Josh Ellingson? No
Mhm,
way. Wait, the same one who does the TV stuff that we had on
yep,
Café a couple weeks
yep.
ago?
He
Ah,
does our art.
no way. Small world.
Yep. So let's see, cool stuff that's come out for Humble. Bunch of stuff's coming out of the Goldberg lab at UC Berkeley. So they basically created this thing, they call it fog ROS, because they're big on this notion of fog computing, which is
Mm.
sort of uh, cloud agnostic, like, or it's cloud agnostic, and then it's also like, hey, I have this robot. The robot doesn't have all the compute power that I'd like it to have, so let's have it sort of instantaneously spin up an instance in the cloud, do some compute, send that data back, and then continue on our merry way. So it's a
Mm.
really cool little library. It basically abstracts away a lot of the like AWS, setup, tear down stuff that you would normally have to write yourself. So that came out in Humble, super interesting. We've seen a ton of cool stuff coming out of this company here in San Francisco called Foxglove. So
Mm.
they've basically gone from so on the left is your standard ROS visualizer called RViz. On the right is their sort of web-based visualization panel. And this actually came out of work at Cruise, the autonomous vehicle company.
Ah,
And so it's just this super slick display for your ROS data that it was built for these giant autonomous vehicles that have tons and tons of data coming through them.
nice to know that something's coming out of that I can actually use.
Oh yeah,
Because I
absolutely.
get stuck around those things all the time.
Let's see. I was out. I think you didn't you have Ramon on from PX4?
We did.
We did. Okay. Yeah. So Ramon and I were actually hanging out in Austin a couple weeks ago. Lots of great new support in Humble for PX4. So
Cool.
a lot of people are taking ROS2 and essentially using it as like the high level planner for their drones or VTOL aircraft. This one I think is really really interesting for this community. So in ROS1, the hardware interfaces were they're not bad, but it was sort of like once you got to the serial port, it was on you how everything was
Mm.
going to communicate. And there was no real like ROS API analog for embedded microcontrollers. It's just a pain. You could run embedded Linux on like your microcontroller and then have it communicate that way, but it was kind of eh. So what we needed for ROS was a better way to do like low level control on MCUs. So there's this new thing in ROS2 and in Humble. It's called micro ROS. And it's essentially just a variant of most of the ROS core libraries that run on these little MCUs on top of an RTOS. And it supports like 3 or 4 different RTOSes, and most of your like common dev boards are supported at this point. So like Arduinos and ESP32s and
Nice.
all of those things.
I keep meaning to check out Micro Ross. I've heard so much about it, but I always, it's one of those things. I'll just have to
Yeah,
find the time.
it's about time to start looking. It took some time to mature. They needed to set up all of the IDE tools and like work through all of the process of making this work. But I really think it's really matured. Like I I was literally eating dinner the other day and I was at this robotic restaurant and I was talking to
Ah,
guys, and they use ROS, and not only that, they use micro ROS for the whole system.
no way!
I was really excited. I'm like, wait, I didn't, this is probably one of the first times in the area that I've heard somebody using it. So I
Was
was,
it Rocket Sushi or was it a different one I gotta check out now?
I think they're called Mesli. They're down in like China
Ooh,
Basin.
cool. Okay.
Let's see what else is going on. We've been working a bunch with some of the acceleration vendors. So for NVIDIA, they sort of came to us and said, hey, we really want our hardware to be well supported in ROS, and we want things, particularly the compute heavy side of ROS to run quickly. So what they did is we worked with them to basically put some hooks in there to help improve robotics acceleration, and mitigate the amount of data churn, for lack of a better word, in the system. And what we're seeing right now is that with some of this NVIDIA hardware support, we're looking at like 10x improvements
Dang.
on like, say, perception tasks. So like building 3D maps, recognizing objects, that kind of thing. See what else. Oh, so this happened this weekend.
No
I literally
way.
put this in
Cool.
this morning. Yeah, Edge Impulse. This is really early. I would say it's like alpha. But we just had a community member basically say, hey, I want to go build a ROS2 interface to Edge Impulse. That's about all I know. I got to read through it this morning, but that's happening. I'm
That
super
is so
excited by
cool.
that. I think they have a pretty good product. All right, TurtleBot. So yeah, here are the two TurtleBots that we have. On the left, you'll see the light, and on the right, you'll see the standard. So big difference here. You can see that one is way taller. Basically, the standard has this whole mezzanine on it. So underneath here is all your components, versus in here, they're all sort of tucked into the robot. But this whole thing right here, this whole PCB, or this whole chunk, is a giant PCB. And around the periphery, there are actually USB ports or USB-C ports, so you can get power and data to make these sort of peripherals. There's a little screen, which doesn't sound like it's that impressive on a robot, but if you've ever had to track down a robot's IP,
Oh my
or
gosh.
like have it like run a subset of programs, makes it so much easier.
Yeah, and
And
for
then
imaging too, if I don't want to connect to something, often it seems like this would be connected to a computer that you're running, but like just being able to sort of see what the camera sees without hooking up to it on a computer is really nice.
well, so it's monochrome. It's just a really simple one. You're not, you could do
For
that.
like field of view stuff, I'm trying to do these robots that like take photos of people, and it's so obnoxious. The framing is killing me. But obviously, like these would be for different applications. But you could do one that like rolls around on a table, takes photos of people.
Well, you know what you could do is you could just run.
OpenCV or some such.
Well, you could actually probably. I think what you could do is run the HDMI port out of the Raspberry Pi and drop like a screen. You could also just take like a tablet and have it take the raw stream out of here and put it on top so you could see it.
Ah, yes. Do you have a lot of computer or robots driving around with laptops on top of them in your daily life?
No, most of them are autonomous. I do. The reason the mezzanine is here, right? This whole layer, I think, really is to be able to put, a touchscreen of some sort on top, or whether it's a tablet or something a little bit more integrated. But you see that fairly commonly. Like you'll see these, delivery robots in, say, a restaurant, where they take your order and you tell them to go pick something up and they come back, or just, general putting a screen on there to make it as a human robot interface. It should be said, we have these robots, right? They're expensive. They may be something that you're a little intimidated by at first. So we also, as part of the TurtleBot 4, we made a complete simulation for it. And I'll show you that in a second. But that's completely free, so you can actually get familiar with the robot without having to buy something. And then you can also take the robot. I can have like a classroom of students, like 30 kids, all running on the robot in the simulation. They all get their own simulated robot, which I think is fairly powerful. And then if you just want to learn, you can run off the simulation. I'll show you that in a second here. Yeah, I put this together. I thought you guys might like this. Just the components in the robot, right? It's not too much to, there's an OakD Pro, a Raspberry Pi 4B, and somehow we were able to get a hold of them.
I know, yeah.
RP LiDAR, and then an iRobot Create 3, which is the brand new iRobot. And then we got the simulator, and we got Humble Hawksbill.
How is are you seeing any repercussions from the Amazon acquisition of iRobot? Are you expecting to see anything change, or?
I talked to them. Everything I've heard is, nothing's changed. Nothing's changing so far. So we're not super concerned about it. Let's see. Yeah, robot stats. Close up of the screen. Maybe we should just take a look at it.
Cool.
Oh yeah, I should say.
Ooh.
Yeah, so we worked with ClearPath Robotics to do the actual design of the robot. They're the ones doing the manufacturing and a lot of design work. Talented group of engineers, amazing people to work with. Just want to give them a shout out because they are amazing.
Yeah, the
And
lessons thing is exciting for our community as well.
yeah, so I've been working through it, slowly trying to build lessons, and I think more coming online. I've actually been working with a ton of universities to get this going. So let's see here.
Oh yes.
Let's little screen share thing is in front of me. So what I'm gonna do real quick.
Yeah, I think you can hide that if you click the little next to the orange. Yeah,
there we go. I should just read.
I don't know why it doesn't auto hide.
I don't know.
You got enough on your mind.
All right, let's see if so. This is gonna, between streaming and stuff, this is gonna eat my machine. But let's see here. I'm gonna pull up the sim real quick before I turn on the robot.
We had a question from David saying, "What's the deal with Ignition Fortress versus Gazebo? That's just a name change, or?"
Yeah, at the end of the day, there was there's ROS 1 and ROS 2. So there was Gazebo was the original simulator, and then we named the second generation simulator Ignition, and it ended up being too confusing and too complex at that point. So what we did is we just decided to move the name back to Gazebo.
Legit.
And let's see here. Is this up? Oh, cool. So what we can do, here's the sim. And basically I have this, my simulated TurtleBot. You can see this, right?
Okay, looks cool. Great.
Yep.
I love the texture on the floor.
Yeah, you can see the texture on the floor. And so this is a little bit big of a world for my desktop to handle, but we can start the sim like this. Robot's going to start moving around. It's not going that quick, but basically what you have up here is you have all the buttons that you'd have on the robot. You have the HMI, so I think I can do, let's see. Come on, undock.
You can do it. I believe in you.
Yeah, it's running about 4% real time, so it's running pretty slow. But anyway, what you can do is you can undock the robot, you can move it around, and then let me see here if I do. Let me see that. So like we were talking about earlier, ROS is just a pub subsystem, right? So I can list all the topics, which is basically, all of the things moving around, all the data moving around on the ROS system. So I should be able to do this. And we can kind of see, oh, well, look, there's all this data coming off the robot. And you can kind of go through and, figure out what you want to see in this robot. So maybe, I don't know. Well, you can look through the topics. You can do all your normal ROS things. You can build, your sort of robot behaviors on top of here. And you can do it all in this sim as it is running. Okay,
what is kidnap status? You have to tell me.
Kidnap status is when the robot is kidnapped. So kidnapping means you picked it up,
and
it's no longer on the floor.
Literally kidnapped.
Yeah, it's literally kidnapped.
How does it know? Because the floor isn't right there. Does it have a depth sensor, or is it the wheels have no resistance, or what?
It's a wheel sensor, actually. So the wheels, if you pick it up, I'm not gonna go pick one up, but the wheels kind of are on this lever arm or something, so they push down, and so that's to detect
oh yeah, that makes sense.
It's essentially a Roomba, right? You don't want it going over a stair, so when it feels that slip, it'll just emergency stop.
I love the idea that you could make a little ee noise flying with itself if you picked it up.
Yeah, I'm gonna get up real quick here and turn on the robot. So it wakes up.
I'm also curious about Joy, but I'll ask you that later. Everybody, as mentioned earlier, there's a bunch of links in the description below. I'll be adding more after the show on YouTube, which will also go up on our Hackster front page and Hackster.io/videos. So you'll be able to click on all of those lovely links to the things that we're looking at now.
All right, we'll give that a minute to wake up. I'm going to go back over here. Say hi. Oh, sweet.
Hey!
Yeah, so other things going on the robot, and I'll maybe try to do some of this real quick when this guy wakes up, is the TurtleBot has full ROS 2 nav support, so you can actually go in and map your environment. You can go and, once you've built a map, you can do all sorts of stuff. Then
Yeah.
you can program behaviors, send robot from point A to point B, do all that kind of stuff. So why don't we?
They're cool.
I'm gonna pull up. I'll just pull up the screen here, so hopefully we can see the robot as it wakes up.
We have another comment. James is working on a couple projects that use PX4 to basically fill the micro ROS role. So you must be excited about the new integrations then. More integrations, more happiness.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it when they sing to us.
Oh yeah, it sings this little song. Let's see here. I always forget what the camera is called on this guy. So color preview image. All right. So what I'm going to do now is this is Arvis, so this is our little viewing utility. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Arvis to, what did I call it? Color preview image. So color. There. So you can see, so over here, let me make this big. So this is basically the view from the robot. It's sitting over here. I have this other stream on. It looks like it's awake now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to SSH into the robot. Now, ordinarily, I'm going to try to do this without connecting my little controller. Robot. Here. Hopefully I have it in my history. What we're going to try to do...
I love that you're doing a live demo. It's my favorite.
Oh, I may have opened the wrong setup here. All right.
Oh no, I'm Cat. I have too many robots.
Exactly. No, I may have too many screens going on here.
Oh, that's fair.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is...
Do you have that problem though, where like you got
a
bunch of robots running around and...
let's do this. View robot. That is not what I want. So what I'm trying to do is remember my command here. TurtleBot view. There is a... Hold on, I've got it over here. Oh, I guess that is what I wanted. All right, let's see if we can... Can we see? Let's see if we can send the robot somewhere.
Cool.
Oh, it's moving. Actually, can we switch camera here?
Ooh.
Oop. Oh, it's caught.
Oh no!
Can we, you want to switch that stream real quick?
Switch what now?
Can you see the other stream that I connected? So you can see the robot moving around?
Alas, I don't think I can, but...
Okay. Well, what's going on right now is, let's do this. Let's add... I'm going to bring up that image again. And what did we call that guy? Preview. Color preview image. That's the
What
one.
is the Joy one?
Oh, that's the joystick.
Oh, that makes sense.
So... Oh, maybe the camera's not publishing. You know what? I may have opened the wrong puppy here. So, what's going on is that the robot is sitting there, it's waiting for commands, and I'm trying to start up. Let's see. View robot. Where'd this go? Trying to get
I
it
love
to
watching
navigate.
you troubleshoot. This is great. Get it to navigate where?
I'm trying to get it to navigate around the house, and you guys can see the map as it's coming up here.
That is super cute. I love your background.
Thank you. Or Viz, View Robot. Trying to figure it out. Well,
I should make some like a really long background music thing that we could have during this time, right? Just play something on the Oscatone over here.
Oh, you have an Oscatone?
Yeah, gotta do a little theme music.
Well, let's see what I can see here. It's unclear why the laser scan's not coming up.
Probably just because it's live. It's got stage fright.
Yep, always worth a shot. So RViz 2. I'm just gonna do this from scratch. All right. Well, here at least we can see the robot, and we should be able to see the laser scan. So I can see all the laser points that are in the robot. Let's see alpha. Let's make that a little bit easier to see. We've also got the depth image. It's a little hard to see because it's a little bit washed out, but you got the depth image underneath. Got the robot model.
Now, having not used this before, are all these different colored bars, are those like sensors pointing in different directions? Are those...
It is the transform of all the different parts in the robot.
Right.
All right. Well, I'm gonna put this guy to bed because I'm not gonna get this running today.
Well, thank you for trying. It's always really interesting, I think. Even more interesting than seeing a properly functioning live demo is seeing like how you go about troubleshooting, and it really lets you sort of dig in more to what the structure is of what you're doing and how you would look up something if you know, if you need to find a command and stuff. Because you've just shown us basically a little quick tour of the documentation and everything.
Oh yeah, there's a fair amount of documentation. What I'm looking for is the right pair of things to run together. For what it's worth, I actually just got this back from my intern. I opened it this weekend. But generally, what you would see internally there is you should be able to go through, run the actual nav2 map of the robot, move it around. I was gonna navigate it over the kitchen, have it poke around, come back home, and show you what the final map looked like. But let's go. Oops.
Well, Ross has a ton of different meetups, or rather Open Robotics has a ton of different meetups and things, so it's possible that, you brought one of these to the meetup that we did in August at Noisebridge in San Francisco, and I have a feeling that if someone wants to see this in action, they'll be able to catch you at one of these events around and see it rolling around and doing its thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I need to, do some work to get these guys up and running. That one's actually still one of the prototypes, and I just sort of got it up and running this weekend. So I'll take a look a little bit more. Other stuff going on though.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Well, let's get to the interesting stuff. Space. So Open Robotics has been working on the. Hopefully, if you were like me, you woke up Saturday morning thinking you were going to see a launch, and you didn't. But we've been working on part of the Artemis project, which is the Viper mission, which is the rover that's going to go to the South Pole of the Moon. Ross isn't running on the rover just yet, but it is running to process all the data that comes off the rover. So that's an ongoing project. Let's do this so you can see it a little bit better. What else we got going on? So there's also the Astro Bee, which is the free-floating autonomous robots that are on the space station. So those all run Ross. We've had a couple other projects come in, and so we've actually started on this new project called Space Ross.
Oh my gosh. I think I saw. Sorry, I think I saw an earlier version of the Astro Bee in a meetup down in the South Bay like 10 years ago. Is that a long-running project?
Yeah, it's been going on for a while. I mean, to be honest, I
So
probably
it was
about
like
10
bright
years
orange
ago, I
and
applied for a job at NASA, and that was one
ah!
of the prospective projects I was going to work on.
Well, you did
uh,
end up working on space robots, but we'll get to that later.
yes, exactly. And essentially, what it is a space certifiable, reusable robotics framework with all of the robotics bells and whistles that you'd want on there. And we're trying to sort of take what we've built with Ross and bring it to space applications,
Mm.
support all of the certification standards. Um, yeah, and just generally make it a lot easier to get something into space and get it sort of certified in a way that NASA will say, yes, this is ready to go, and make that process a lot easier.
There's
Um,
already Raspberry Pis in space, so I don't see why not.
yeah, why not? And, and there's sort of this hierarchy of moving stuff up that ladder, right? That you can kind of go. I think NASA generally calls it a tech demo. You do a tech demo,
Huh.
then you do, a smaller mission, then you can move up to a larger mission.
Cool.
Let's see,
Automware.
other stuff, and I'm only talking about AutoWare just to give a brief background on it. But AutoWare is basically like a collection of ROS tools and modified ROS source code to do vehicle autonomy, like autonomous vehicles, right? It's all based on ROS 2. Really good vehicle autonomy course we put together at the bottom there. But the reason I bring that up is we've seen like crazy growth in like student competitions for autonomous vehicles. So, for example, there's this thing called F110th, where it's generally undergraduate students that go around, build these,
Cool.
build these little RC robots, right? There's a depth camera, a LiDAR. I think that's like a Jetson Nano there, and they go and race them. I was at ICRA, which is the giant robotics conference, and yeah, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of students racing these. And what we've seen is they've gone from little tiny RC cars to actually Indianapolis Motor Speedway putting together this thing called
Wow.
Indy Autonomous Challenge, where they give them like basically one step down from like real Indy cars, but
Mm-hmm.
with a full autonomy stack. And they're actually racing these things now at like 190 miles an hour autonomously.
How
So
does
if you
I'm
want
writing
to if you want to build a fast robot, like Ross is the sort of way to go. Um,
I'm writing this out. India Autonomous Challenge. I want to see this. Sounds amazing.
yeah, and then other stuff coming up. We have a podcast. I'm getting ready to go to Japan because we're going to have RossCon Kyoto here
In
in about 2
Kyoto.
months.
I
Yeah,
wish I could go.
and
Maybe.
then
Maybe I'll make it work.
yeah, make it work. The thing to note about that, if you don't want to fly to Japan, we have a live stream of everything. Everything goes up for free on our website, so you can still get all the content. You don't necessarily have to go to Kyoto. And then
Mm.
my normal last slide where I put all of the resources where people can come and chat and read about Ross, get their questions answered, that kind of thing. So I'm gonna
Awesome.
kill that. We can just chat for a few minutes.
Yeah, great.
Questions. I know that's all over this place, but
Awesome. Okay, well, okay, there's so much to dig into. We talked about space. That's great. I'm gonna put our little banner up here again and see if we have any questions from the audience. I think we've gotten through all of them. Okay. So tell us about. I should do something related to your work first. So, the the TurtleBot has ROS running on a Raspberry Pi,
mhm.
but it also runs on Ubuntu. Is that 32-bit and 64-bit, and also Windows? What
Uh,
all operating systems do we have?
so generally, so there's this thing. All right, so with Ross, like a lot of open source software, you can do anything.
Mm.
That doesn't mean you ought to, especially if
Woo!
you're just starting out. So, for example, um, you can run it on Windows. If you're just starting out, I wouldn't recommend it. And
Mm.
what I recommend people do is if you're just getting started, use the newest version, use it in a well appointed virtual machine, and run with what we call a tier 1 operating system, which is what we say is the you know
The best
preferred
one.
operating system for
Mm.
that variant of ROS. If you don't, if you so I think Humble runs on 2204. If you try to go run it on 1804, you're going to have a bad time. I do not recommend
Mm.
that at all. And so I wouldn't if you're going to pick a version of ROS and you want to run it natively on your desktop, pick the thing you're running. So if you're running 1804, that means I think 1804 was like Dashing or something, or one of the even earlier versions. Like don't try to mix and match. You really do want to pick the right version for what you're working on, especially if you're new to ROS.
Good to know. And is there a good like a chart somewhere that people can reference to figure out what the best one is for their particular operating system they're working with?
Wait, can you say that again?
Is there like a chart or a reference page somewhere where you can look that up? Which version is best for
Ooh,
your hardware?
yes, I think.
Y'all have such amazing document. I can't believe you're only 50 people, but like your documentation for this stuff is so intense, and I guess intense is the wrong word, but like very robust
Yeah,
and
I'm gonna
complete.
put in the chat. So if you just Google Rep 2000,
Ah,
so for all of ROS 1, there's just this big doc. It lists like all the dependencies for ROS, all that kind of
mm,
thing.
awesome. Rep 2000. I'll see. I'm not quite getting it yet, but yeah. So humble Hawksbill. And I just wanted to show people really quick. There's the Oak D cameras and the Oak D Pro that Kat was talking about. Super cool camera. Can you tell us a little bit more about this camera and its capabilities?
So the Oak D is kind of a collaboration between a company called Lexonis and our friends over at OpenCV.
Mm.
And so it's, in a certain way, I like to say that the Oak D is like the OpenCV TurtleBot.
Ah,
Right. So it's just this, camera. It's a stereo camera pair. And I think there's also, it's like a stereo grayscale camera and then a single monocular RGB camera with the embedded compute capability to do all sorts of fun stuff. So you can do, you can do, you know, build depth images. You can do onboard, deep learning models. You can run just about anything on it. You can stream off of it. All the sort of compute capability that you want on there is baked right in. And
nice.
the cool thing about it, a Raspberry Pi at the end of the day is not a great robotics computer. It's an acceptable one, but it's not a great one if you want to do fairly sophisticated computer vision. And so what this allows us to do is keep running that smaller piece of hardware, but then also have a bunch of acceleration for those more complex sort of perception tasks.
Cool. Oh, sorry. People saw me looking around at the Rep 2000 page, which someone was mentioning in the comments. There's also a link to that on the Getting Started page that's linked below. As you may know, I'm constantly like pulling up the next page for things that we're talking about while listening. Thank you for putting that out. Cool. So, TurtleBots. Let's talk about you because we don't have that much time left. But I would love to hear some about your adventures at Planet. So you did work on space robots. What were you doing?
I worked on satellites. So worked at Planet. Got probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I was I worked on the rectification team initially. So for mission 1, which was, we're getting the fleet up and basically getting the company and getting the fleet of satellites to a position where they were imaging the entire planet every 24 hours, which is a lot of data processing. And so initially I worked on the team that, when the images come down from the satellite, you don't know precisely where they are on the ground. You know roughly because the satellite's at a particular location, it's pointed in a particular direction. So you have a good guess, but it's not exact, right? It's not like you can do very precise things with it. So the rectification team would come in and you take your particular image and you'd look at, like, say, prior images or prior data, and you take that image, you go wee, and you like slide it around, you'd get it all lined up to where it was on the ground, and then you would know fairly well where, that pixel belongs to this position on the planet. So I did that initially, and then since I was really fairly capable with the internal processing capabilities, I did some of the early machine learning. I basically put together the machine learning team there. And let's see, we did some cool stuff. We put together a competition where we got probably one of the biggest annotated data sets of things like um, deforestation in the Amazon. So spent a ton of money and a ton of time basically building all these little chips of this is what deforestation looks like in the Amazon, so that we could hopefully build better models and get a better understanding of like, hey, this is where a certain, or like illegal mining is another huge one in Peru right now. So these are like
Mm.
areas where can you detect new areas of illegal mining?
And there's ways that people can get involved with that as well. I know that you're not there anymore, but
Hmm.
they've been having these hack days where people can access their APIs and access their data and combine them with other stuff. So, for example, there are people who are like using it with color data to figure out what the weather is in a specific area, or for deforestation and things like that, and where places are going into drought. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the case anymore, but it used to be that they had all open source, or they would open source all of the California data.
Hmm.
Really keep up. I mean, it's fun data. It's beautiful data to play with. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. The other thing that's you should think about is not just the data that comes from them, but pulling in other data sources, right? So there's all sorts of other fleets of
Right.
satellites. There's open street maps data. So that was one of those things that I wish we could have gotten when I was there, gotten more of, or gotten closer to, is that you have all this data, open street maps, you have all these images. We can now sort of, hey, well, we know where the roads are because we
Mm.
have the street data. Can we now like build the data set from that automatically?
Yeah. We have a question from Manura who says, I'm working on a project related to rehabilitation robotics. If I already have a device set up, would it be possible to simulate the moves first over ROS? It sounds like yes. You showed us that simulation platform.
Yeah, I mean,
But,
yeah, the difficulty generally is building a model, right? I think a lot of it is
mm,
like a lot of people who are using ROS end up being software engineers, and then the difficulty ends up being like, hey, I don't know a lot about building a CAD model that has all these like um, physics parameters in there, or how do I go about finding them, or how do I put this all together? So that will take a little bit, figuring out mass and that kind of thing, but it's not too bad.
it seems like Gazebo might be the tool that
Oh yeah,
Manura is looking for.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, I have another question for you. In your capacity as someone on the board of the Open Source Hardware Association, what exactly do you do? And you also have this month coming up. I believe October is like a open source hardware month, and there's some cool stuff going on for that. And you want people to maybe certify.
Well, so Open Hardware Month is generally October, I believe. Board wise, we did, uh, I think it was kind of a light summer because we did a ton of work around the fellows, right? That
Yeah.
we got this massive Sloan grant, and we were able to pick, let's say it was 10. We were able to give away grants to like 10 researchers to promote open source hardware in like science research. And so that
Oh,
was a big one. We were doing a ton of that. I have not checked up on Open Hardware Month just yet. We kind of, everyone kind of took July and August off mainly, but
there.
it is coming up. That's been the big one. And to see like the one I'm really interested in from the fellows is like, there's Carlotta Berry, who's been doing a ton of robotics education. um, the fellowship itself is a year-long program. So what we've done is we've basically written these grants to all of these, or given these grants to all these academics, and they are going to go out, do a bunch of research on like, hey, this is a better way to like document, answering these questions of like, how do I work as an academic, and how do I promote open hardware for fundamental science research within, in academic sphere at at this time, and what works, what doesn't work. And in within open hardware, right? There's obviously like tons of different domains that we want to talk to people about, because there's people doing, open hardware for medical research. There's people doing just like pure crazy awesome FPGA designs, and
Yeah.
there's a whole breadth of different people doing different things and talking about it, what it means to um, use open hardware in their field.
I have to mention also that Ginger Zung of our own Hackster team is also among the fellows. Or she
Mhm.
might be an advisor. I always get that wrong. But this is such a cool program. And we've had a few of these folks on the Café as well, which I'll totally uh, link to in the description. But yeah, so cool.
Well, and it's really exciting for us, right? Because we've been building this relationship with the Sloan Foundation between this and the actual certification project.
Mm-hmm.
We're really starting to have the capability to build out the things that the open hardware community would like to see.
Yes. And so I would love to certify my first open hardware project. How would I go about that? What's the process like?
Oh, I would just Google
I
OSHA
know, but
certification. But generally, what you're trying to do is, there's a website, and all you're saying is like, here's my license, here's my documentation, here are all my design files. And what we'll be doing is you just sort of submit all these things. We go take a look at it, and it all ends up in the certification website. So you can say like, uh, here's a whole directory of the certifications.
this is so
What
cool.
what I what I think is cool about this, right, is like if you think about software, right? You think about something like Python or like ROS, where people build these individual modules, and then as you build more and more open source modules, it sort of um, accretes, right? So that now I like in a robot, right? I have something that does control, and I have something that does perception, and I have something that does planning. And I can start mashing those all together in new and interesting ways and build higher level things. And what I would like to see, hopefully, with the OSHA certification is that, you have all these different components, right? And people are able to pick from this basket of all these
Mm.
different certified open source hardware components and then put them all together and
Ooh,
be able
yes.
to build something much more complex.
Love that. And that's really very similar to what you're doing at Ross as well.
Yeah.
It's just this whole idea of
Um,
wholes greater than the sum of their parts, all made from open source bits.
yeah, you take an OAK-D, you take an RP LiDAR, you take a Raspberry Pi and Create 3 and mobile base, and you smash them all together and you have a robot.
That is so cool. Oh, we ought to wrap up here because we're
Yeah.
about at time. But is there anything that you'd like to throw out there before we close? Anything else coming up that you would like to mention?
Well, I think ROS.org is your main spot for raw stuff. I guess other cool things. I actually have to run immediately after this.
Oh yeah,
I have to go teach, so I
I shall let you go.
volunteered to teach for open source, or sorry, not open source. Volunteered to teach for this program called Code Nation. They're in the Bay Area,
Yes.
New York, Boston, Chicago, San Jose. They're always looking for mentors. It's great. I used to coach first. First is a lot of fun. It's a lot of commitment, though. It's like a 40-hour a week commitment. This ends up being
Mm.
like a 6 hour commitment a week, maybe 8, depends on the week,
Hmm.
where I can just go and drop in. I work with I'm teaching an all girls school this year. So I got 16 girls. Like, here, we're just going to learn the basics of like front end development and, how to put together websites. Same thing I did when I was like that age. But the program is really cool because they get the kids out and start getting them jobs in high school. So they have
I.
they have they have money to go to school and stuff. So it's a really cool program. They need more mentors. Check it out.
I'm absolutely going to check this out. Code Nation, you say?
Hmm.
Cool. We'll pull that up here. And I realize you need to go, and so anytime you need to drop off. But thank you
Yeah,
so much for
yeah. We
joining
should
me.
do it again. We'll,
Oh,
we'll, we'll
for
cover
sure.
we'll cover a little. We can cover one thing in detail versus everything.
Yes, I love it. And we can always link back to this for people who need a primer. Here we go. Code Nation. I'm going to walk people through all these things that we looked at really quickly. But
Mhm.
again, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining.
Yep.
So,
Thanks, everyone.
yay! Uh,
Yep.
Code Nation, that's so cool. I would love to check that out. I was a first kid myself and would love to sort of pay it forward, but it always has felt like a large commitment. It's for like months out of the year, and people really. It's amazing how people get into it. But yeah, so we have ross.org. There's an openrobotics.org post about the new Humble Hawksbill release. The TurtleBots at clearpathrobotics.com. They have a page for that. OD cameras. There's lots of introductory material for getting started with ROS and ROS 2 documentation that Kat was looking at while working on the live demo. Micro ROS. I absolutely have to dig into that. Edge Impulse on Ross. I'm going to put all these links in the description of the video. Maybe not all of them, but we have the Twitter for the Open Source Hardware Association, as well as a few others that'll come up. Gazebo, the simulation library. Open RMF, the robotics middleware framework that Kat was talking about. NeedyBot, I talked about really quickly. That's just an interesting one. TurtleBot 4 lessons. We've got Nav2, AutoWare, really interesting, putting those in autonomous vehicles. I have to check out the Indie Autonomous Challenge. Ross Discourse and Ross Answers, 2 resources for getting your questions answered. Documentation. There's so much we talked about. Open source hardware trailblazers, we've talked to a few of those. Be sure to check out Josh Ellington. We interviewed him after he did apparently the art for the humble Hawksbill and your other releases, which is really cool.
All of it.
Just such
All of the
interesting
Ross art.
stuff. Yeah, that's so cool. Ramon of the Drone Code Foundation. We talked to Dr. Carla Berry about her work as Norris Demonist. There's your Twitter, Open Robotics Twitter, Ross Twitter, all these good Twitters for you to check out, and we'll put the links in the description below. Thank you again, Kat!
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, we'll see you everybody next week, if not before. Hack on!
Yep, bye.